towards the tail end of October, that moon started getting real bright and full. And it seemed like as soon as the foliage peaked, the wind and rain came and knocked it all down. And Allie and I were holed up in the office, editing all our fall stories, finishing client projects, and preparing for new ones. As Allie took computer breaks to work on her Etsy products, and I took breaks to bake sourdough bread. And my starter was getting a little too active some days. Loaves were getting better and better. Wow. And before we knew it, it was time to move most of our big plants back inside before the frost hit. All these maples are gone. And we got out for an afternoon walk on the local trails for the first time since spring. And I thought about how quick this year flew by, even though I was actively making an effort to appreciate and savor all these tiny moments. And we ran into our beaver friend as the sky turned highlighter pink and orange. The beaver. Really? Yeah. And we started checking out a few plots of land for sale, as we want to consolidate our living and working spaces and stop paying to rent and begin paying to own. The cabin isn't a viable full-time residence for many reasons, and we're looking for a home base with plenty of space, where I can store my old machines and we can live and work in the peace and quiet of the countryside full-time. But unlike other living and working decisions I've made in the past, this time I'm in no rush. And I want it to feel just right. And so on one golden morning, I grabbed one of my loaves and we headed for the hills, stopping at my parents' house to check out the color by the river. I always love coming to this exact spot in the fall. It's the place where I bookmark my life, take notes on how I feel, where I'm at, what I've got going on. And on this day, I watched the leaves flow by with the current and breathed deep and long, as the hard work we had dedicated ourselves to the last few months was almost over, and the freedom we would gain from it would be worth the sacrifice. You want it, Dinkley? He wants this one.
Look how playful he is.
And to be in a place I love, with the ones I love, on an easy, golden October morning, is a victory on its own. And so I brought that loaf to John and Maria's as a surprise, and said hi to Bertha the chicken, and then we headed off to have a look at another piece of land. What we ultimately need is a place that's flat, open, and easy to access, where we can start by building a barn, a place to store and work on vehicles with an apartment up top, and then Allie and I can each build our own little creative studios off to the side. But starting from scratch is a whole different scenario and timeline than buying a small house with a barn and everything already in place. And one thing I don't want to do is get over my head and get involved with another never-ending build. But before anything happens, we're going to finish the cabin and enjoy it. We're just starting our research early. And while most of the hills near us were starting to look bare, My research was showing a lot of the states south of us were nearing peak or hadn't even turned yet. So when 2 of our work trips ended up being pushed off, we had a gap of free time plopped into our laps, and we decided we'd go on an autumn road trip. It seemed like southeastern Pennsylvania might have great color, but other than that general destination, we had nothing else planned. And on one rainy morning, we finished up some work before packing up the old Rover and heading south. Wait for it. And that rusty lower canopy of beaches was illuminated by the rain, and we weren't far from home when we found our first waterfall. And right off the bat, the trip had a truly spontaneous, free-flowing vibe with no strings attached that we hadn't felt in a while. Nothing to shoot for any clients, no approvals, just real life as it happens.
South or north?
We want to go south. And after some sushi and hot sake at a small hole-in-the-wall joint on the corner in a town we had never heard of, we walked the side streets in the rain.
Taco Bay.
And as I looked up and the rain hit my cheeks, I was reminded of all the alleyways and towns across America that I've walked alone on late nights in my travels, and how those were always my favorite moments to keep in my back pocket. And this little trip was already giving me a taste of what it will be like to share those experiences with someone else who appreciates them. And just like the seasons, different kinds of weather have their own special charm, and rain has a certain kind of magic, especially in the fall. And so after researching some forums, Allie found off-roading trails that led to campsites somewhere in the Catskills. And so we set off into the night, clearing the old road as we went. And for the first time ever, I shared my rover bed with a companion, and we woke to a colorful forest surprise and the sound of rushing water nearby. so while Allie prepped breakfast, I wandered around to find where that sound was coming from. And without meaning to, we had ended up in a beautiful state park surrounded by trails, which gave us a new agenda for the day. Wait till you see what's over there.
But then I ran out of juice.
What juice? Ah. And so I made some Red October and picked away at some melodies I found blowing in the autumn air. Well, I rode upon the wind to find a place I'd never been, somewhere that I had seen in a dream. As I rode away from home, I felt an aching in my bones. Leaving, so it's harder than it seems. Now I'm riding on the wind again, a blueberry changing, going, but I ain't staying long. If I never make it home again, throw my gang up on again. Tell them I'll see them later on. And so we headed off on one of the trails towards a sign that said waterfall to see what this foreign forest might yield. And the falls were raging. My favorite part were the tiny bubbles that came from the chaos. The forest was wet and alive and a deep sensory experience. We stopped many times to soak it in.
I know. That's crazy. I just looked at the map.
And after our hike, we continued down the old road into the unknown. And we had to clear our way a few more times, as this old road hadn't had much love in a while.
Here, do you want to do the control?
Yeah. Well, we done did it.
That's why it's fun.
And the whole way through, we noted how different sections of forest brought about different shades of fall, and all had unique feelings of their own. And we found a couple cool old hunting cabins right on the trails.
Look at the backyard. It's like a swimming pool.
And while the hills seemed more than half bare, the color that was left was still captivating. And so we had cheese and jam and salami while we figured our next route towards Pennsylvania. We drove into the golden sun, past endless farms and auto yards, and ended somewhere near the PA-New Jersey border. And we woke to a world of fog.
Yeah. Okay.
So we are right near New Jersey.
We really wanted to search more of Pennsylvania for foliage, but we had moved so slow soaking it all in, and we didn't have another day to spare where we could drive further west. So Allie found some cool places in a state I'd never expect to look for fall foliage: New Jersey. And we cut through the fog towards the high hills. And in one of my favorite moments of the trip, just before the fog dissipated, we found some of the best light rays I've come across in a while. While we headed towards the top of this park, we came across more unexpected finds, and that feeling of seeing something cool and pulling over to check it out with nowhere else to be is what this kind of trip is all about. And the foliage here was glorious, and while some of the early trees were already gone, a majority of them weren't even at peak yet. And that's the thing about fall foliage. There's no one week in October that's best. I mean, it completely depends on the area. In some places further south of New England, the foliage can last all through November.
That land that I pointed out earlier, it says
And so we ran around reading about the history of the area before heading to one final lookout before we were homeward bound. A few more spontaneous pit stops gave us some absolutely glorious fall views. was in this field in eastern New York that the sunlight of our final day came to an end. Another surprise find that filled my heart with that longing feeling that you only get when you're on the road. Riding on the wind, going to places you've never been, finding beauty where you least expect it.